Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Why Lightweighting is Critical in Modern Trucking. It's presented by Hendrickson. I'm your moderator, Jim Park. I'm the equipment editor at HDT, Heavy Duty Trucking Magazine, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. I encourage everybody to ask a question as a topic comes up in conversation that you'd like addressed. We're going to tackle all those questions at the end of the presentations. We'll keep those in the queue, and we'll try to get to all the questions if possible. But if we don't get to your question, don't worry. We'll have someone contact you by email after the event to sort out that question for you. I'm joined by two lightweighting and suspension experts on today's webinar, both from Hendrickson. Mark Williams is the product marketing manager for commercial truck vehicle systems, and Don Hester, the Director of Product Development for Trailer Commercial Vehicle Systems, both from Hendrickson. Welcome to you both, and thanks for joining us today. Mark, let's start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do over at Hendrickson?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. So Mark Williamson, been with Hendrickson for about 14 years, and so what I do in charge of product marketing here. So try to basically make sure that the products in which we're working on, both from a current perspective as well as future perspective, are in line with what's going on in the market and kind of what everyone wants to see. And again, this lightweighting conversation kind of goes where the market's going with all the zero emissions vehicles, whether or not it be CNG or battery electric, all those technologies do add weight. So where Hendrickson Truck comes in is we try to do everything we can to try to offset some of those increases in weights from those technologies with our suspension solutions. So that's kind of making sure we're driving our product development where it needs to go for the future to be successful.
And Don, a couple of words from you, if you wouldn't mind, on your tenure with Hendrickson and what you're up to there.
Yes, sir. Don Hester, Director of Product Development, the Trailer Division in Canton, Ohio. Been with Hendrickson 19 years, all of that within product development and engineering. So I spent quite a bit of my first several years of my career in research and development in our test lab, validating our product, moving into product design, program management, and then most recently I'm Director of Product Development. So again, very similar to the truck approach, the trailer side, making sure that we're keeping up with what the market's looking for while maintaining a brand recognition for durability and keeping an eye on the weight and making sure we're satisfying what customers are looking for. So thanks again for having us and letting us be part of the conversation.
Well, I'm certainly glad you could both join us today. I'm glad we've got a couple of pretty knowledgeable folks here to talk us through this lightweighting exercise. We live in a consumer-driven society today, and it's all about getting goods to market. Consumers are buying millions of new products every day, and we have to get that stuff to the market, to the stores, to the shelves, ultimately to people's doorsteps in some cases. So trying to move as much of that product as possible, as efficiently as possible, really adds some challenges to what we do here in the trucking industry. We have to get the product on the truck, and we also have to comply with all the weight regulations. So getting more and more product on the truck to satisfy consumer demand gets to be a challenge at some point when the truck gets too heavy. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is keeping the trucks as light as possible while still being robust and durable and living up to customer expectations. On a typical tractor trailer, we normally see weights of somewhere in the 35,000 pound range for a typical on-highway truck. The weight capacity, as we know, is 80,000 pounds. So if you do a bit of math, that leaves us just 45,000 pounds of product, or at least leaves us room for about 45,000 pounds of product, which may sound like a lot, but when you start filling trailers up with heavy objects, that 45,000 pounds gets consumed pretty quickly. We're also facing some pretty steep increases in operating costs for trucking. And we know as fuel prices rise, labor costs rise, government regulations keep coming along and adding more and more complex emission systems to our trucks. Those costs are driving the cost of doing business up. The only way we can recoup a lot of those costs is by putting more product on the truck. So now we're back to where we started with 45,000 pounds worth of cargo space and all kinds of additional pressure to get more on there so we can earn a little bit more money from our trucks. So just want to toss something out onto the floor here for our two suspension experts. What kind of things are you hearing from your customers these days, guys, about the demand for lighter equipment so they can get more product on the truck? Are the shippers and consumers hollering for greater and greater payloads these days?
Yeah, good question. They are hollering, and it's about all the pressures that you just talked about. Fuel prices, I don't know what diesel fuel is in your neck of the woods, but here in Ohio, they're not going down. Just putting 30 or 40 gallons of diesel fuel in my pickup is, $150 anymore. So it's a challenging landscape. Fuel is not going to go down anytime soon. Taxes are a thing that everybody deals with. Nobody likes. And if you're worried about the bottom line of operating your fleet, you're trying to figure out how to get increase on the bottom line and the things that we're dealing with from government regulations, the emissions that are affecting more on the power unit side. They know we need to comply with these types of regulations, but also figuring out how to be profitable. And that's without a pandemic that we're just coming out of, in which it was hard to get any sort of supply chain stabilized for any part of the industry. And so things are not getting things are not getting easier, and so everybody's trying to look for any opportunity to increase profitability. And so, depending on what you're hauling, if you can haul one more gallon of fuel or one more stack of groceries to the grocery store, that's all valuable things that we can be working on as an industry, is to make everybody more profitable, right? The commercial vehicle industry is the backbone of America, and anything we can do to help everybody be successful in it, especially our fleet customers, is really what we're focused on. And so lightweighting comes into that discussion, as Mark alluded to earlier. If we can offset the weights that being added for some of these new technologies for emissions, that's valuable to our customer for sure.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I agree. Everything that Don said, yeah. And again, you look at the ATRI studies as well, and mentioned fuel prices being the number one part in your slide they had there. And again, ATRI, that's the latest, the number 1, 2, 3 item that everyone's concerned about is fuel prices. And again, a big part of lightweighting is lightweighting in general is all about freight efficiency, right? So no matter what application, it's all about it being as efficient as possible. In the game of trucking, right? It's a game of pennies, right? I mean, you at cost per mile. Anything you do to reduce that cost per mile to make sure you're as efficient as possible and delivering freight more efficient than everyone else is only going to help you stay in the game longer, especially with spot rates doing what they're doing and decreasing off from their all-time high, and again, costs continuing to creep up, obviously, equipment being as high as it is, the raw materials, as you had on there, the fourth bullet, being high. Anything you do to offset and increase your bottom line is only going to help the fleet be successful. So lightweighting is one of those things that can help improve your bottom line by offsetting, maybe potentially getting better fuel economy, and again different systems, maybe hauling more freight. I know a lot of fleets now they cube out instead of gross out, but there are those applications that do gross out your bulk haulers, obviously, things like that. Some of your grocery fleets, if you take advantage of all the lightweight technologies out there, maybe you can carry an extra pallet of pop or something like that, right? If you take, a decent amount of weight out of there, where pounds mean dollars, right? I mean, big fleets, big weight sensitive fleets up to like $11 a pound is what they value the weight at. So again, just being able to take advantage of all those things.
Well, you make a good point where you talk about it's not always just about payload. If your truck is excessively heavy, you're just dragging around, a few hundred, a few thousand pounds that aren't adding to your bottom line. In fact, they're draining your bottom line because it takes fuel to move those extra unnecessary weight, I guess. So Let's dive into lightweighting, the whole concept here. What is lightweighting, really, in a nutshell?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. In short, the goal here is to remove some weight from the vehicle without affecting the performance. And so how do you do that? There's several different ways to do that. Some of them are a little easier than others. So we kind of take the low-hanging fruit approach. Is what's the biggest bang for our buck for lightweighting? And the goal there is, at least from Hendrickson's perspective, is how do we do that? How do we reduce the weight, increase the value of what we're giving to our customer while not affecting durability? Because that is the hallmark of what we do. Is we provide a very robust, high quality, durable suspension. And so we got to make sure that we aren't affecting the performance of a suspension while also adding value and reducing weight. And so we do that in a few different ways. When we give these types of challenges to an engineering team, first thing they might do is they can look at lighter weight material or advanced material to replace individual components while maintaining the strength that we need to keep the stress in a reasonable level. And so that's when you start talking about alternate materials such as high strength steel or aluminum, getting into polymers and composites. It's not everything is made out of heavy steel anymore. We've refined our processes for manufacturing. We've figured out that there as these technologies develop for these more advanced materials, they can become reasonable for our industry. And so that's one thing that we can do. Another approach is to integrate multiple parts or functions into one system, right? So I believe this is where Hendrickson has really done a nice job, because we try to look at the system holistically. So if you look at all the components and define the function of all the different components and think, okay, well, how can we integrate these and have one piece do the function of two pieces and things like that. And so when you have control of the entire system, it allows you to be a little more creative in how you do it. And then the other way is you can kind of just start from a blank slate and make a fundamental design change to the entire system. So you create a product that looks nothing like the previous design, but accomplishes significant weight reduction. So we're optimizing, and sometimes we got to look at this from a completely different perspective than what we've done in the past. We start with one design and we just continue to nickel and penny it away from a weight perspective. Sometimes we've got to take a step back and say, okay, if we were to start all over, knowing what we know today about manufacturing processes and materials and technologies, would it even look like what we have today? And then sometimes we've got to scrap what we knew in the past and start over, and then you have something that's way more efficient than what we've kind of constrained ourselves to in the past.
Do you have any examples of a suspension component or product that you relied on for years, and then kind of went back and said, "Oh, we don't have to do that. We can do this instead"? Is there sort of a tale from the engineering department you could share with us there?
Yeah, sure. From the trailer perspective, I'll let Mark chime in here in a minute on the truck perspective. But on the trailer side, our in-track suspension is one example, and probably one of our most respected examples in the industry, because the in-track suspension has been a hallmark in the trailer industry for decades now. And really, that design of that suspension was started years beforehand when we were working on our HT product line, which was kind of a legacy product. And as we were trying to refine that manufacturing process, we had made some advancements in the suspension design by removing components, and then we started getting into automation. And with automation, you got to completely rethink how you fabricate the suspension, and you have to have precise material specs and control the dimensional stability of the suspension in a much different way than we had thought about in the past. And so we kind of redefined our manufacturing processes, designing for automation when we designed the HT suspension. And we thought, as we were working on that, there's a lot of opportunity here for us to be even more efficient, because at that time Hendrickson wasn't in the axle business. The trailer side of the business wasn't manufacturing axles, and so but as we were looking at how we might make a more efficient suspension, we said we need to really have a better control of the axle and dimensional control and things like that. And so we invested in axle manufacturing primarily so that it would allow us to advance the technology of suspensions. And so as we moved to what is now called Intrax, which was the first integrated trailer axle suspension system, that was a completely revolutionary thought in the trailer industry at the time, because no longer were you purchasing a suspension and then purchasing an axle separately and marrying them together like on our legacy product. But when we did that, we realized we had to invest in unique manufacturing processes so we can machine the straightest axle in the industry, and that because on an Intrax axle, all of our brake componentry is mounted onto the trailing arm, which was kind of different than what we have done in the past. And so making sure all of the brake components that are mounted on the trailing arm align perfectly with the wheel end components and brake hardware that are mounted on the spindle took a lot of engineering effort, a lot of manufacturing refinement, and really rethinking how we manufacture suspensions and that was a perfect case. We were able to take significant weight out of that particular suspension back in the day, and we've continued to refine it over the years. But that was one example that we can point to, is we had to rethink how you make a suspension in order to allow the engineers to come to the solution we came to.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us. That was interesting. Mark, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if it's going to be quite as robust of a story, but no, but no,
it's a hard act to follow.
No doubt. But yeah, overall, yeah, we do have we have developed products. I'll use an example of our steer axle, our SteerTech NXT steer axle that's out there. It was a foundation in AirTech way back when, and previously, and the foundation axle that was our SteerTech axle. Anyway, as times have changed and things have evolved, market conditions themselves evolved. That was launched in 2001, so it's been in the market for 22 years at this point in time, right, when it was launched. And over time, there's been a lot of regulations that have changed. A big one, the FEMS 121, the brake stopping distance requirement, shorter stopping distance. And what that does creates more brake windup. You have to use different materials on your brake spiders and stuff like that to ensure that you get the appropriate stopping distance. What that does, that increased stop or decreased stopping distance, increase the energy in the wheel ends. And basically what that would do is obviously create more stress on the components of the axle, the connections, all that fun stuff. So we evolved our designs to adapt to those market conditions, or those regulations that we kind of alluded to earlier. That was a regulation at that time, FEMS 121. So over time with that, different weights have changed, trucks specs have changed. Everything's gotten a little better, a little tighter. Like the fuel economy improvements, all the added weight from the greenhouse gas requirements that have come along the way. All that added weight had put additional stress on every part of the component, every part of the suspension system. So over time, we found opportunities to improve and make sure that we can live up to those requirements that our customers demand. Only having to service stuff, once a year. You can't have additional servicing requirements because now you have something that's lighter weight, right? Because the market condition has changed. You have to evolve the design to make sure it fits within the market. So doing things, changing out different hardwares to make sure you have a more robust clamp load on the joints to make sure they evolve. But either way, we learned some lessons along the way with AirTech, and then AirTech NXT, our next evolution of the product that has come out and it's released on the Daimler side. With that, we took everything that we learned with the AirTech product and made improvements, to make it work better for the AirTech NXT, giving it a best-in-class ride, being as lightweight as possible, saving up to 155 pounds in some cases, versus the competitive offering. Offering, again, best-in-class ride, handling, feel, and ensuring that, drivers are satisfied. Because, again, one of the big things, the big challenges, again, going back to the NATRA report, driver shortages is a big deal. So ensuring that your drivers are happy and they're driving equipment that rides very well is only going to, ensure that the drivers are there. I mean, beyond pay and all that fun stuff, but if pay being equal, if there's a good piece of equipment that rides and handles very well, they're going to be satisfied to go up to the job today because they're not being beat up as bad by being on the road, right? I mean, that's kind of a thing,
absolutely.
right?
Yep.
So having a good riding product is only going to help to ensure that, it's successful. And that's what we've done with our AirTech NXT. So the evolution of our AirTech to our AirTech NXT and all those NXT products that we do have to offer is the evolution of learning from the school of hard knocks along the way, and getting a very good, robust product that we get that good feedback loop from the end customer if something is not living up to snuff.
Well, one thing, or two things, I guess, neither of you mentioned were tires and wheels. They're not exactly suspension components, but they're wheel end components, and they integrate obviously with your suspension. How much of an issue is that for you to design around, whether the customer is looking for duals or wide singles or aluminum or steel wheels?
Yeah. This is Don talking. On the trailer side, we've got suspension offerings for both of those, and aluminum wheels, steel wheels really doesn't bother us. Wide base singles versus conventional duals. Really just you have to be careful of your overall width of your tire, because you still have to stay within the 102-inch wide regulation, and so making sure that they're speccing the wheel offsets with the suspension tracks to get the widest stable suspension they can without extending over that 102-inch width is really what we've focused on, and most of the industry already converted over to the 102 wide versus the 96 wide trailer. So we use a lot of 77.5-inch track suspensions, which allow you to use wide base singles with an offset or conventional duals, and we can accommodate either one.
Okay.
Yes, same thing on the truck side. We can accommodate both. We have had some other products on our vocational side of the business that we have had to redesign because using duals, and it didn't have as good a tire clearance as we'd like. So our next generation of product did take those into account. But as far as current offerings today, all of our stuff does package with the appropriate, with all the variances of rims, tires combination.
Okay.
So
let's talk a bit about the benefits of lightweighting. Talked about how you do it. From the customer's point of view, it's probably going to be a bit of an upcharge for a lightweight component or system. What can they expect to get out of it after they've made that investment?
Yeah, not in every case is lightweighting going to be an upcharge. It really depends on how it's done. Like I said earlier, if we're having to switch to a different material, that might be the case depending on the technology and the manufacturing cost. Sometimes it's just good engineering can allow you to reduce weight without increasing cost. But there is significant benefits, specifically in like Mark was saying earlier, in parts of the market and where a pound is worth $10, $15, $20 to some fleets. They are looking at what is the lightest weight set of components I can get or system I can get, and so they're not only looking at the suspension, but they're also looking at all the wheel end content. So we're looking at materials in the hub structure. Are we using aluminum or ductile iron or Oz-tempered ductile iron to get even thinner material without giving up any of the durability? And then drum brake, disc brake. Right now in the industry, the weight of a drum brake versus disc brake are pretty equivalent. There's a couple different options. You can get a pound here or a pound there, but early on, disc brakes were kind of the heavy, expensive option. And from the weight perspective, they've come down to being very close in weight to drum brakes. And so, if you really need all the weight you can out of your system, there is cost because of the material we're using and the supply chain. But otherwise, a lot of what we're doing from a manufacturing and engineering perspective is trying to make the optimal system and taking as much weight out as we can, again, without giving up any of that durability.
Yeah, so again, same thing on the truck side, optimizing the design to ensure that the performance is what people expect, and they have that expectation, again, because it is a Hendrickson product, and then again, so from a robustness standpoint, expect to get the ride they expect from a Hendrickson product. It's all things that everyone would expect from having a lightweight product from Hendrickson. So yeah, ensuring all those things are, and all those boxes, so to speak, are checked is very critical, very important to us. And again, fuel economy was one of the items that was mentioned there. Again, that having as optimized of a product as possible. It's really tough in the heavy truck segment to correlate exactly what, lightweight, each pound that you take out of a vehicle correlates to for fuel economy, but it definitely does have a improvement because, again, every pound of weight you take out is maybe less horsepower of a requirement. Maybe you can detune the engine a little bit. Maybe you can gear it a little differently, right, for your terrain to ensure it to run a little lower in the RPMs to ensure that you can, sip on as little fuel as possible as you're going through your deliveries.
That makes total sense to me. Just a reminder to all the attendees, we're speaking with Mark Williamson. He's the product marketing manager for trucks at Hendrickson, and Don Hester. He's the director of product development for trailers at Hendrickson. And we're talking about lightweighting today on our webinar. We are going to be taking questions at the end. If any questions occur to you as the presentations are going on, please jot them down and put them in the queue, and we'll get to those at the end. And if we happen to miss any of those questions, you will be contacted after the event, and somebody will follow up with you on your questions. So now is a great time to start loading up the question queue. I see we've got a couple in there already. If you have any, please don't hesitate to ask. We'll do our best to get them answered. Back to lightweighting now. I guess one of the concerns from the user has to be, okay, if I'm going to take some weight out, am I sacrificing or compromising strength or performance? We leave that to the engineers at Hendrickson to sort that out for us. But is this something customers need to be concerned about, or should they? Well, are they going to be kept awake at night worrying if their suspensions are up to the jobs they're doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And for sure, the expectation is they can get lightweight without sacrificing durability, and that's kind of the name of the game at Hendrickson. Is we don't. The goal is not to reduce expectations as we reduce weight, but it's also important for fleets and those who are speccing the equipment to make sure that they understand exactly the purpose of the spec they're looking at. And so, kind of the American approach is bigger is better, heavier duty is better, and so when we're talking about lightweighting, that kind of goes against that mentality. For instance, if you're looking at suspension capacity, there's a variety of different suspension capacities, and obviously the weight changes with those as well. And so if you know the duty cycle you need for your fleet and what you're hauling, then you can kind of dial in what you want your spec to be. And so not over-speccing or not speccing for the heaviest duty application or the highest rated part of the system is something we need to be careful of, especially on the wheel end components. For instance, on brakes, there's different capacity brakes, and those are basically to make sure your vehicle stops if you are carrying whatever the rated load is of the brakes. And usually they're we got 20,000 pounds up to 25,000 pound brake ratings, but very rarely does any axle on a trailer on typical highways gross over 20,000 pounds. And so if you have a 20,000 pound axle, why would you want to put 23 or 25,000 pound rated brakes on there other than it sounds better, but you might be sacrificing performance and weight by doing that. So making sure you're specifying the system to do what you want, not just the biggest number because it seems like it's the best number, right?
Yeah, so again, from the truck side, similar to what Don said, I mean, we look at the specific application in which that product is going to be used, all applications, the most severe to across the board, to make sure it's designed to work for the hardest of each of those applications, to make sure that there's no durability concerns with our product in those applications. So we designed to make sure that we're robust enough to not have those worries. That's the stuff that, if it wasn't, it'd keep all of us up at night. Because I mean, we do stand behind our product, and our brand is second to none. But yeah, that we make sure it's dialed in and optimized for all those specific applications and all of our products in which we design.
You both just talked about certain components that have evolved over the years, and how the suspension has to sort of pick up the slack in some of that. Can we talk a bit about Hendrickson's DNA, I guess? I mean, you've been building suspension since the early 1900s and focusing on lightweighting since the 70s. You must know a thing or two about how changing components like brake friction, for example, changes some of the design criteria at the suspension level. Can you guys both kind of dig into that a little bit for us and talk about how the suspensions have evolved to accommodate some of those changes in the other components?
Yeah, good question, Jim. And this is Don speaking on the trailer side. Lightweighting is part of our DNA, and as you mentioned, Hendrickson's been around since 1913. We've been in building trailer suspension since the late 70s, and durability has always been the number one thing we're focused on. But again, this pressure towards lightweighting is continuing to make us hyper-focused on delivering the optimal system, right? To deliver what they need without any more weight than is absolutely necessary. And so, for instance, if you look at early design of our air ride suspension and how we integrated into the system mentality, the air ride suspension in the early 80s, there were many different bushings that were encompassed in it to allow for the compliance between the axles and the trailing arm. And so that was, when you got bushings, wearable components on the suspension include the bushings and the shocks and the air springs. And so if you have many different bushings on there, you got to be concerned about maintaining those. And so when Hendrickson started looking at optimizing suspension design, we wanted to try to minimize those types of wearable components while not affecting the other pieces of the suspension system. And so, our trifunctional bushing was one example of how, without that piece of the engineering puzzle, we really couldn't make our suspension do exactly what we wanted to do without significant amount of maintenance. And so our trifunctional bushing is really kind of the heart of our trailing arm suspension, and it was designed back in the 80s, and with some slight tweaks, it really is very similar to bushing today, and allows for the weldment that we have in our design to survive the types of rigorous applications it gets put into, absorbing that energy without causing any sort of performance issue on the suspension. And Mark, if you had any other thoughts on the truck side.
Yeah. So again, kind of what we've talked about. Like, again, taking on as much much of the system as possible, not just being that component supplier, but being able to optimize design from a full system standpoint does allow us to do give and take and trade and move stress around to different things, and allow us to optimize materials for those exact locations. A frame hanger, maybe we design a frame hanger to distribute stress. We design our frame hangers to distribute stress a little bit better, so that maybe you can optimize your frame, give a thinner frame rail for different applications. Where again, weight means everything, and limiting how many bolted joints, right? How many, like all the things that go into the cost of the product for the OE, for the customer, that gets rolled up is looking at optimizing all of those things, all the designs to be the most efficient thing possible.
Okay, we've got a pretty good overview then of how the lightweighting has evolved over the years and some of the thinking that goes into it. Let's talk a little bit about specific products now. We talk about maybe the Intrax or the Vantrax suspensions and how the work you've done on those has accomplished this goal. Who wants to start this one off? Don, maybe?
Yeah, I'll take this one. That's
okay.
Primarily a trailer product. And, I talked a little bit about the Intrax, so I won't bore you with that again. But, as we developed our Vantrax suspensions, which is basically our tandem bogie suspensions, Tridoms as well, some of the advancements we made there, 20 years ago, we launched the large diameter axle, which is in most of our suspension systems at this point. So our large diameter axle was, it's 5 3/4 inch diameter versus the standard 5 inch. We were taking out 25, 30 pounds per axle without giving up any durability, or it actually is a stiffer axle than a 5 inch just because of the section modulus of the axle, right? And so think about it as an I-beam. You really want to put all your material in your flanges, not in your web, because with the bending moment, you get the biggest bang for your buck by putting your material as far away from the center as possible. And so when we went to the LDA, we were able to take weight out without giving up durability or stiffness. And so, and because we were manufacturing our own axles at that time, we were able to look at this from a system perspective. So we had design control of the trailing arms, the axles, and all the other componentry. And so that was one area. This is, again, here in the early 2000s, and a couple times since then we've made revisions to our suspension design to integrate the large diameter axle, removing weight, and our customers have not seen any degradation in performance or ratings because of that. So that was one example. And since then, if we move on to the next slide, there's some images of some of the more recent changes that we've made. And the AENT suspension, which you'll find on quite a bit of the flatbeds and tank trailers out there in the industry. Basically, that we were looking at our 23,000 pound suspension and really was performing well on many applications, and realizing that a lot of the on-highway applications didn't really need the same type of performance as some of the more vocational off-highway suspensions. And so we developed our AENT suspension, which was a narrow pivot, which required us to develop a brand new bushing as well. And so having control of all of these components, not just a couple of them, looking at it from a system perspective, we can design our bushing to perform just as well in a different geometry than we had in the past. And so that allowed some adjustments to our frame brackets, and again, taking out tens, 20s of pounds per suspension without sacrificing any of the durability that our customers expect. And then more recently, we've developed technology like zero maintenance damping, or ZMD, both available on our Intrax, Vantrax, and Ultra-K. And so, it's these types of approaches from an engineering perspective that allow you to redefine the system, okay? So, typically when you're developing a suspension, you're looking at where you mount all of your componentry, and shock absorbers have always been an important piece of the puzzle on air ride suspensions. And so our investigation into how we can add more value to our customer, we weren't necessarily looking to lightweight. At this point, we were looking at how we can add more value to the customer. And so one piece of the puzzle that a lot of our customers are focused on is total cost of ownership, not just the upfront price, but how much is it going to cost me to maintain this product over its lifetime. And if the suspension lasts forever, great, but there's always things that you have to pay attention to, maintenance perspective, and there are wearable items, and I mentioned it before, we have to have good health of your bushings and your air springs and your shock absorbers, and shock absorbers are just something that we get used to changing. And so they might live 3, 4, 5 years depending on the application, sometimes longer. But if we can reduce the number of maintainable components like shock absorbers, that's value to our customer. And so with ZMD, we redesigned the air spring so that we can do the damping within the air spring, reduces the need for a shock absorber. And then when doing that, it opened up a bunch of doors from a design perspective as well. And so Ultra-K was the first product we launched, which shock absorbers can't even really be fit onto a Ultra-K because we eliminated that constraint. And so that was the first shockless suspension as designed, and that allowed us to really take the last significant chunk of weight out of our sliding subframes on going from a Vantrax to an Ultra-K. We were taking 100 pounds of weight out of that system, which, we're kind of at if you look at the law of diminishing returns, there's not that much pig iron being hauled around on our suspensions any longer. So taking 100 pounds out was a pretty big deal, and that was probably 2015 we did that.
Well, I can speak quickly to that zero maintenance damping suspension, the ZMD. We did a test drive video on that a couple of years ago. Went down to Canton, went to the plant, and took a truck out for a ride. And it's really dramatic, I have to say. We've talked a lot about payload and weight reduction and other benefits to these suspension technologies. You also mentioned the driver shortage. And any driver who's ever driven that ZMD suspension, I'm sure, would come away shaking their head going, is there even a trailer back there? It's quite remarkable what you guys have managed to accomplish with that. And speaking of remarkable, statistic I'll throw out here onto the table. In some cases, some of your suspension lines, you've seen a decrease of up to 40% in the weight of the suspension since the 1990s. That's a huge number. Um, and you're not done yet. Can you give us some hints or clues? Maybe start with Mark on this as to what's still to come and where you're going with some of your current and next generation products.
Yeah, it's kind of you mentioned, just continuing to focus and looking towards, reducing the maintenance side, as Don alluded to earlier, and continue to take weight and optimizing the efficiency of the product. So using advanced materials, throwing as much aluminum as possible at the products, and going to 100 KSI steel where at all possible to optimize our frame section. So getting the same strength or durability out of the product by optimizing the section and design to work as well as the previous generation of product, while still getting as lightweight as possible. So, again, the kind of things we are working on. We recently, about 2020, we acquired a company called Lightflex, a composite spring manufacturer for the industry, and composite springs are definitely a lightweight alternative to steel springs. So what it does offer in some applications that we have looked at, from just replacing the steel spring that it's replacing, it offers, so to put into account two springs, up to 240 pounds of weight savings, which is pretty significant, and that's in a medium duty truck application. It's pretty significant when you look at it. When again, some of these future technologies come into adding all the weight to the batteries and other zero emission vehicle zero emission technologies where weight is everything. Integrating all those things, we do have our Optimax, our Intermax suspension that again takes up to 400 pounds out of a heavy truck, a Class 8 tractor. So again, those technologies do offer significant benefits, taking that 400 pounds. But again, those technologies with Optimax and Intermax, the beauty of those is they're forward liftable tandem axle and suspension systems. So the next generation of a 6x2, which for those that are not aware, with those products or the tractors equipped with those products are below a certain threshold, or lightly loaded or empty condition. Those products do lift, and then you're basically driving around on a 4x2 tractor, so you have a better ride. Again, taking advantage of that 400-pound weight save, and then you get the efficiency of having one single drive axle, and again the efficiency that comes with lifting one of those drive axles as well. So further towards the lightweighting and freight efficiency in general. Those are products that we're just continuing to proliferate and put out there to the market, because again, to be successful with those future technologies, offsetting the weight that's required for those, the future regs coming to advanced clean fleets, advanced clean trucks, the different greenhouse gas regulations, 2027 especially, and then on top of that, you have the NOx emission also coming on top of the 2027, which is also challenging. Will challenge the industry quite a bit.
Well, you'd have to be living under a rock if you weren't aware of the challenges that are coming our way, especially when it comes to battery electric trucks and ultimately hydrogen fuel cells as well, because they're going to be, and they are, we know, considerably heavier. So looking forward, what does the future hold? Are we going to be able to? I mean, the other issue with the battery electric and the fuel cell is the truck itself, excuse me, is going to be heavier to begin with. So you've probably got to, beef up the suspension, especially on the front axle, over that time to accommodate the weight of the batteries and the hydrogen tanks, et cetera. What can we expect to see in the future?
Yeah, so you definitely do see that, exactly what you alluded to, the heavier steer axle. And we do see that. We are talking with most, if not most of the EV companies or low emission vehicle companies to help them to develop suspension solutions for them. And you do see that where, especially equipped with with batteries, you do see a higher capacity steer axle in those applications. It's not uncommon to see a 14K steer axle in some of these battery electric vehicles. I mean, it just with weight distribution, it's got to go somewhere. So so you do definitely see that. And then on top of that, one thing you can't disregard is your standard gross combination vehicle weighs 80,000 pounds. You do get a waiver to go that extra 2,000 pounds to help offset some of that additional weight that you do get if you are speccing a low emission vehicles product. But again, if we can do anything to offset that, again, further improve their freight efficiency while still being as CO2 conscious as possible and NOx conscious as possible, that's what we're trying to offer, is solutions that help to do that.
Mark, how about you? You're talking on the tractor side, the truck side here. What do you have to add to that?
Oh, that was me. That was just talking there on the track.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay, well, Don, you can sit this one out, I guess, because batteries aren't going to affect trailers all that much, are they? At this point, anyway.
Yeah, they're still trying to figure that out. Most of what we're talking about is going to be on the power unit discussion. We're still yet to figure out where all of this componentry will end up, and Hendrickson will be there to support the industry with however we can to support this move to all the different alternatives that Mark just talked about.
Yeah, it's coming. There's no way around it. The government's pushing us in that direction, and like it or not, I have to say, we're going to get electric trucks at some point, and that all has to be, digested and absorbed and sorted out and figured out by commercial fleets. These, folks who run these fleets are going to have to be on top of all this and figuring out how they can keep their technicians and drivers trained and up to speed, as well as, speccing and buying the right equipment. What does that mean for Hendrickson? Are you going to be playing a larger role in the speccing process, do you think, or customers are going to be coming to you for advice on how to navigate all this extra weight?
Yeah, so when we get contacted by OEs that are coming out with their zero emissions vehicles, and there's different challenges with that as well. So one thing I will say with battery electric vehicles, the torque curve is not like that of a diesel engine by any stretch of the imagination, right? It's very flat and very full very quickly. So what that does put a lot of energy into the suspension and the joints that hold the axle to the suspension, right? So ensuring that the design of those bolted joints, design of everything that interfaces can live up to that type of energy going into it is core and critical to us to make sure that our customers can be satisfied and happy with our products, the way that they're designed. So we have had cases where we've had to modify designs of current products, so to speak, to improve clamp load to ensure that the bolted joint doesn't slip, and that's okay. That's all part of the fun of product development, things that you learn and iterations to support those zero emissions vehicles. And one thing that you have a difference here you have for with different types of power generation, that would be on the EV side, right? You have e-axles and you have kind of inline motors that connect to like a traditional drivetrain. The unstrung mass of those is completely different, right? An e-axle that had an axle that's run off an e-motor, right, connected to a traditional drivetrain, the unstrung mass is going to be similar to that of a diesel vehicle, whereas an e-axle, that unstrung mass is going to be a lot higher. So the demands on those components that attach to that, as far as how the energy goes and how the ride feels, is a bit different, right? So you want to make sure that the appropriate shocks are specified for that. You don't just want to willy-nilly just throw that on there and call it good, right? It's not going to ride even close to the same. So ensuring the balance of having an appropriate ride and good ride to keep those drivers coming back and driving the product and enjoying the product the way it feels, and give them the confidence to drive in those products. And not just slapping parts together. I'll put it that way.
All right. So before we get to the Q&A, we're at 10 to the hour now. We're going to go a couple of minutes long. Hope folks are okay with that. Try and get some of these questions answered. But just want to wrap up this section of the webinar. How can Hendrickson partner with the OEs and ultimately the customers to deliver the sort of suspensions, durability, cost, and lightweight solutions that they're looking for? What's Hendrickson's role there?
Yeah, this is Don speaking from the trailer side. Good communication is key to any relationship, no matter if we're talking personal or in this industry. And so we love talking to our customers and understanding what they're seeing. I don't envy all the challenges that we just talked about from the fleet perspective, and as they're navigating all these different alternative fuels and this push towards green and figuring out how they're going to move their fleet forward into this new economy. And so talking to your Hendrickson rep and talking to the technical folks at the OE and communicating back to them what you feel as though is the right solution for your fleet is key, and so that we can understand exactly where you're coming from and making sure we're heading in the same direction, because there are so many paths that are being explored right now, and eventually the best solution will eventually come to the top, but it'll take a few years, right? With any new technology, it'll take a while until everybody determines collectively the best direction. And so we just want to make sure that we're partnering with our fleet customers and our OEM customers and make sure we understand which direction they're headed so we can support them appropriately.
Fair enough. That sounds good. Now, with 8 or 15 or 10 minutes or so left on our program today, we'll try and get through as much of these questions as we can before we wrap up. If you do have a question, please type it into the question field on your screen, and we'll try and get to it. If for some reason we don't get to your question, you will be contacted after this is over, and somebody will address that question for you. But since we wrapped up with electric trucks, let's go to our first question, which is about electric trucks. We all know they're going to come in with a significant cost premium over diesel trucks. They're going to be enormously expensive. Does that mean that electric vehicles, EVs, are going to have an appetite for more expensive options to cut weight as well? I mean, there's only so much you can do to try and take 4,000 or 5,000 pounds off the truck. That's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, no, agreed. And so what we found is that yes, the OEs that are building out electric vehicles, there is a little more of an appetite to pay for some of these more expensive technologies that reduce weight. So like there's the composites, right? The composites they're definitely not as cheap as a steel leaf spring, but they do offer quite a bit of premium as far as ride is concerned. But most importantly, it's the weight benefit, and then the weight correlates directly to the ride, right? So to the range that you would achieve by offsetting that additional load that's from the batteries. So yeah, that's what we have found, is that definitely they're coming to us looking to do anything they can to cut weight out of a product and out of their end product that's what they're selling.
You've all got your work cut out for you, that's for sure.
Yeah.
What role do you think manufacturing will play in achieving some of these lightweighting goals?
Go ahead, Donald.
Yeah, from a trailer perspective, manufacturing, when we're talking about continuing to focus on lightweighting and using, different materials, thinner materials, high strength steel, at Hendrickson Trailer, our core competency is fabrication, and so welding is one of our core competencies in forming material. And as the material gets thinner and thinner, we need to make sure that we're developing processes to form all those pieces and weld them together, and so and do it very consistently and in a robust fashion. And so that can be a challenging. I don't know how strong of a welder you are, but the thinner the material gets, the more challenging it is for you to lay a nice bead on there and not burn through your material. And so we're developing processes and ensuring we have good quality systems to allow us to put these pieces together and deliver a high performance, high quality system without any issue from a manufacturing perspective. And so we're continuously focused on advanced manufacturing and even exploring technologies that we're not currently utilizing, so that we can, as these new material technologies develop, we're understanding what manufacturing processes might be available to us.
Okay. Good question here on the value proposition for lightweighting here. Is there a threshold of number of pounds saved where product improvement starts to become worth it for the consumer if they're spending X number of dollars a pound to save weight? How much do they really need to dig down before it starts to show up on their bottom line?
I can take that one first. This is Don again talking. It really depends on what you're hauling, right? And so in some cases, for instance, if you this is a moot point if you're cubing out, right? So if
Right.
you got a van or refrigerator trailer and you're cubing out, moot point. If you're grossing out with bulk material, that's one value equation. If you're grossing out carrying fuel, then that's a different equation. And if you're grossing out carrying, with cryogenic tanks, that's a completely different equation. And so each part of the market has their own value equation for how much weight is worth. And so, when we understand that, and we try to work with our customers and make sure we're directing them, we're not directing them the most expensive option, we're directing them to the most appropriate option for their application so that they're happy with the performance and they feel as though they're getting a good value. That's really what we want to provide, is a good value for the application.
Okay, that sounds reasonable to me. You've talked a lot about the lightweighting process and the engineering that goes into it. Most fleet managers are probably thinking maintenance. How much is this going to cost me in maintenance? I don't want to do any more maintenance. How does this process affect the overall life cycle cost of the truck and the maintenance equation?
So for us, whenever we're taking into account any new product development, we do everything we can to ensure that the maintenance is at the forefront. It's all part of the total cost of ownership that we look to optimize. So for us, we look to reduce or eliminate as much maintenance as possible versus whatever the incumbent process is or product is that we're replacing. So it is at the forefront. It's all part of our development process to ensure that we're developing as robust of a product with as little maintenance as possible, that is as lightweight and also rides as well as it possibly can. So it's all part of that value equation. I mean, there's a lot there in that whole Venn diagram, but that's what we try to make sure we intersect and take all those appropriate pieces into account.
Another interesting question here about market trends, I guess. Do you see more fleets through your OE customers asking about lightweighting options when the price of fuel starts to go up, when operating costs increase, as opposed to times, which we haven't seen much of lately, where costs were reasonable and manageable and predictable? Do costs drive this in a direct way?
Yes, 100%. I was at a trade show right after the Russia invaded Ukraine, and that was all of our lightweighting products. That was exactly where everybody was going to, with the cost per a barrel of oil going north of $100, $110 a barrel. That was at the forefront of everyone's discussion. How can I optimize weight? How can I optimize efficiency? How can I improve my freight efficiency as much as possible? So yes, without a doubt is, and you see a direct correlation if you look at some of the different things that are purchased. Like different lightweighting technologies purchased along with the price of fuel. You always see that being at the forefront of everyone's speccing options, and then it kind of level sets, and then something happens, and lightweighting becomes more of a precedence. I'll put it that way, because it's not free, but it is an investment in your fleet to ensure that it's your total cost of ownership is as optimized as possible.
Okay. We don't often talk about the secondary market, at least in your world. But what kind of implications might there be for the second buyer with a light-weighted suspension? Are those pieces of equipment in demand on the used truck lots?
Yeah, the fleets that we talked to, they have demonstrated fuel economy over time. They typically do not have as much trouble or any trouble selling their products and their units in the secondary market. Just because people do know, like example, right? The average tractor trailer gets 6 miles to the gallon, some along those lines, and the fleet contracts are for fuel surcharges based upon that same 6 and change. Right, so if you're doing anything above that 6 and change, right, your fuel surcharge, that's extra money in that fleet's pocket. If let's say they're getting 8, 9, even some fleets are getting 10 miles to the gallon with their tractor trailer combination. Anything you can do to get above that threshold will only help ensure that there's more dollars in that fleet's pocket. Because one thing you do get feedback on if you're offering a lightweight product that offers additional fuel economy is you get feedback. Well, it doesn't matter. I get paid back for that for that additional fuel, that cost and everything like that. Well, yeah, but if you're above that and you even do better than that, what it's based upon, you can really help to improve your fleet's bottom line, and yeah.
Which industries would you say put the highest value on weight saved? I want to add, we're just about out of time here. If you have a question, please get it into the queue as quickly as you can, and we'll try and get it answered before we turn into pumpkins here. So sorry. Back to that question there. Which sectors or which industries do you think put the highest value on weight
Most
saved?
definitely that bulk fleet. So your fuel haulers, some of your food haulers, your milk trucks. People that are grossing out, right? Those are the ones that are they can pretty directly correlate. Each pound of weight savings can correlate to additional pound of cargo that I can carry, right? So the cryogenic tanks, as Don mentioned before, things like anyone that's bulking out. Those are the guys. Those are the fleets that are definitely going to value that additional payload.
Okay. And I think we'll wrap up with this one. One final question, unless any more come in. Are there any regulations that commercial vehicle manufacturers and ultimately fleets need to be considering when lightweighting? I guess maybe we're talking stopping distance here, or some of the other regulations that apply to the robustness of the components. I don't want to get into heavier trucks at this point, because that's a rather contentious issue. If we start adding axles and weight, then that's another story for another day. But let's just focus on the regulations pertaining to lightweighting.
Yeah, I'll take that one first. The regulations, there's nothing specific about lightweighting, but you do have to be careful about the capacities, right? And so on the trailer side, the manufacturer is responsible for establishing the GVWR, GAWR, and so on. For instance, GAWR, the gross axle weight rating. There's some misconceptions in pieces of the market about what that actually means, and so you have to look at every component within the axle to determine what your GAWR is, because your axle might have one rating, your suspension might have one rating, your wheels might have a different rating, your tires have a different rating, your hub system might have a different rating, and from a GAWR perspective, they're looking for the lowest capacity on that entire suspension. And so if in lightweighting you start to look at changing your spec to a different capacity, you just got to be cognizant of the fact that could affect your GAWR. And so, again, understand what the application is, making sure you got the right components to stay legal on the road.
All right. I think we're going to wind it up there. That's about all we have time for today. I want to thank Mark Williamson, the product manager for truck commercial vehicle systems at Hendrickson, and Don Hester, the director of product development for trailer commercial systems over at Hendrickson. Gentlemen, you both did a fine job. Thanks very much for your time today and sharing that expertise with us. I hope everybody enjoyed the webinar. If you're interested in learning more about lightweighting, we urge you to visit hendrickson-intl.com. That's hendricksoninternational.com, and you can learn more about the product there. And I also want to mention that this webinar will be available on demand on the Heavy Duty Trucking website. That's truckinginfo.com/webinars. Thanks, everybody, for participating. Hope you learned something today, and have a great day. We'll catch you again soon. So long.